From Washington, the McLaughlin Group, the American original. For over 3 decades, the sharpest minds, best sources, hardest talk. It's the 33rd Annual McLaughlin Group Year-End Awards 2014 Part 2. Here's the Master of Ceremonies, John McLaughlin.
Destined for political stardom in 2015, Pat.
Elizabeth Warren. Eleanor has a leader and Hillary has a problem.
Eleanor.
Vivek Murthy, the newly confirmed Surgeon General, founder of Doctors for America, who's a brilliant leader and entrepreneur in global health issues. We're going to hear from him next year.
Is Elizabeth Warren your leader?
I think she's bringing a very important message to the country, but I think Hillary's hearing it too.
Tom.
Susana Martinez, Republican governor in New Mexico.
Did you hear her answer?
I did.
The perfect political answer, right? Mort.
Jeb Bush. I'm still a great believer in what his political future is.
The envelope, please, Tom. Thank you. You seize this? Oh, here it is. Let's see what we got
You've
in
got
here.
to tap it.
How more?
You tap it on you. Yeah, there you go.
We'll tap it on the head.
Yeah, lucky.
This Johnny Carson style. Great American.
Karnak.
Passed away. Destined for political stardom in 2015. British Prime Minister David Cameron. This year he barely held the United Kingdom together and had trouble keeping his governing coalition intact. Next year, Cameron will redefine his country's relationship with the European Union that will counter the growing threat from the UK Independence Party while keeping Britain in the EU. A tightrope act that Cameron will pull off. You care to comment?
Yeah, I don't think he's going to pull it off.
You don't?
No.
Does anyone think he's going to pull it off?
I don't think so. Not at all. I don't think he has
You
got
don't
a
think
very
he'll-
slight chance.
No?
I'm a fan of David Cameron, but he's not a magician.
That means a no.
No.
No?
No.
The answer is no. Okay, destined for political oblivion. Pat.
Venezuela's Nicolas Maduro, John. I think Venezuela's going to default on its debts. Almost has to.
Eleanor.
Red state Democrats, they all got wiped out in November.
Tom.
I like Pat's, but I'm going to go with Nick Clegg, leader of the third biggest party in the UK. Well, he's a coalition partner in the British government, but he's going to struggle in next year's election.
Clegg.
Nick Clegg.
C-L-E-G-G.
Correct.
Mort.
Well, I think Nancy Pelosi has seen her best days, and I think she's going to decline steadily over the next 4 years.
Destined for political oblivion. Harry Reid, former Senate Majority Leader, now in the minority after a year as a backbencher. Under the majority, takes all rules he created for the Senate. Reid, a former pugilist, will decide it's time to hang up his gloves and not run for re-election. Okay, best political theater of 2014, Pat.
Joni Ernst's ad saying as a little girl she used to castrate hogs and so they ought to send her to Congress. And they did. She's a United States Senator.
Eleanor.
Bridgegate still swirling around Governor Christie, and Governor Christie is always entertaining. Shut up and sit down when he doesn't agree with you.
Tom.
Gruber.
Mort.
Nancy Pelosi.
Best political theater, Kentucky Democratic Senate candidate Allison Lundigan Grimes. Refusal to say whether she or whether or not she had voted for President Obama during her run to unseat Republican incumbent Mitch McConnell. She was trying to position herself as independent from Obama. Cornered, she invoked the sanctity of the privacy of voting. Great political theater. Okay, worst political theater.
I think it's President Hollande, John, getting on the motor scooter with a crash helmet, going to visit his mistress and being photographed on it. He is now, as Mort indicated in the last show, at about 10% approval.
Hello.
President Obama wearing his tan summer suit, stopping in the briefing room to answer a question and admitting he had no strategy for ISIS.
Tom.
Too many people who were using the Ferguson situation, which at any level was a tragedy, for their own narrow gain.
Mort.
Well, I still think it's the way the whole Senate Democrat report on the CIA and what they did during the interrogation of captured prisoners. So I think that is still going to be, in my judgment, a real issue going forward, and something that is totally out of the interest of the United States.
Worst political theater, President Obama's primetime announcement of a unilateral immigration amnesty for 5 to 7 million illegal aliens. The speech was so blatantly political that no major television network carried the address. Neither CBS, ABC, nor NBC. President Obama was deprived of a huge primetime audience. Okay, most underreported story of 2014, Pat.
John, we've all seen the beheadings on television, but what's underreported is hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of Christians in Syria and Iraq and across the Middle East are facing persecution, martyrdom, and something approaching genocide.
Eleanor.
The Republican-led House committee that declared the administration did not commit any malfeasance in the way it handled the attacks in Benghazi. Underreported in the Washington Post, it was on page A14.
Tom.
Many thousands killed in the Central African Republic. No one's really heard about it or cares, except the French, to their credit.
Mark.
Well, I think the U.S. energy boom has been underreported. We've had a huge breakthrough in the technology of fracking. It's changed the whole world and the economy of the whole world. It's changed our dependence on foreign oil. It's changed our alliances in terms of their value to us. It's weakened the Soviet Union, Russia, to an extraordinary degree. I don't think we really have an idea of just how critical that is.
You're echoing something I said last week.
Well, I
covered it on the show, that's right.
Yes. Well,
Feel free to use it any time you want.
I would have given you
even on my show.
I would have given you credit. I just didn't have time at the time.
Most underreported story was the importance of manufacturing to the U.S. economy. It accounts for 1/3 of our gross domestic product. The manufacturing sector is a driver for other parts of the economy. This year, a sharp upturn in manufacturing index helped generate the dramatic upturn in jobs at the year's end. Where's the reporting on it? That's what I'd like to know. Would you like to know?
Well, look, John, manufacturing has contracted dramatically over the last 40 years. I don't want to get into it. Let's move on.
You want me to fight it out alone? Okay, the most overreported story, Pat.
The post-Ferguson protests, the people lying down in the streets, going into Apple Store in New York, blocking bridges, all the rest of it. The cameras are what is bringing the crowds.
Eleanor.
The missing Malaysian jet, a tragedy for sure, but CNN was so obsessive covering it that the network became the butt of jokes.
Well, Tom.
The Ice Bucket Challenge, noble cause, but became so divorced from charity and became a sort of populist selfie thing, which was boring in the end.
What is this?
The Ice Bucket Challenge, people were pouring ice themselves. Good cause, but it became a populist, people wanted to show off with it.
Television, John.
Well, I think climate change is one of the most overreported stories that we've had. I don't really think it's that predictable an issue anyhow, and there's so many changes that are going on now in terms of what produces higher temperatures. So I think that's an overreported story.
Wow, I would put it in underreported.
Good for you, Mort. The most overreported story, the Republican Party's demographic demise. A coalition of single women, Hispanics, and African Americans was supposed to prevent a Republican from becoming president ever again. But this fall, the gender gap disappeared. Republicans drew as much as 37% of Hispanic support in some races, and men, especially working-class white men, a Democratic constituency, overwhelmingly voted Republican. Your time has come, Pat. You ran for president too early. Okay, biggest government waste.
The $25 billion we spent building the Iraqi army, which ran away as soon as ISIS attacked.
Eleanor.
The taxpayer-funded suit to sue President Obama for making changes in Obamacare.
Tom.
The fact that we have fantastic special forces who, in limited numbers, could provide a key fight against ISIS, and we're not using them.
Did you hear Pat's prediction?
I did.
What did you think of it?
I love all Pat's predictions.
You didn't listen to Pat's prediction.
I listened to
What
Pat's
prediction are you talking about?
Well, what statement, whatever it is.
I always listen.
You think the Iraqi army, we spent $25
We've talked
billion,
about the
whole
Iraqi
thing
army many
collapsed?
times on the show.
Yeah, well, what do you think of what he
Well,
said?
they're reconstituting the Iraqi army, so it's improving. I agree with him, but it's improving now. It's not all lost.
Well, you hear that? He's qualifying your prediction. What?
Well, I think ethanol subsidies are one of the biggest wastes that we have in our whole agenda of activities.
You've never run in Iowa.
In
All right,
certain parts of the country,
hold it. Will you
maybe.
please, there's a statement of mine. The biggest government waste is the loophole in the earned income tax credit, a so-called refundable credit that allows you to get money even if you do not pay any income taxes. It allows illegal aliens to receive it. So people in the country illegally receive, get this, $4.2 billion a year in the payments. The biggest government waste. Okay, best government dollar spent, Pat.
Orion, the new American spaceship, which at the end of the year made a spectacular orbits of the Earth, and it went through the Van Allen belt, and it was a total success. We're back, John.
I never thought you'd predict that.
I didn't predict it, I
predict
just
it, but-
said it. I thought
but
it was the best
support it?
dollar spent.
Yeah.
Since when did you support Orion?
I was always for
Yeah.
the space program, for heaven's sake.
Were you?
I agree with Pat on that, but
Okay, Eleanor.
I agree with Pat on Orion, but I must say the Earned Income Tax Credit is one of the best programs. It was started by President Reagan. Republicans, Democrats alike support it. It's not a waste of money. Best government dollar spent is the money to fight Ebola in West Africa,
that's right.
and it was enhanced in the lame duck session, voted on by Republicans and Democrats.
Tom.
The joint direct attack munitions dropped on top of ISIS, saved many lives.
Mort.
Well, I was going to say the money we spent on the Ebola vaccine as well, because that,
You can say it.
I think it's a fantastically important thing.
I'll move on.
I had a fallback position just in case, since I knew I was going to be the
Save your
last.
correction until after the show.
No, this is really important.
Okay, let's go.
The partial funding of Israel's Iron Dome, which helped that country save itself, but taught us what you can do in terms of being able to intercept missiles flying in from a hostile country.
True. Best government dollar spent, the $10 billion that the federal government spends annually to protect cyber attacks. Last year, there were 228,700 cyber incidents involving government computer systems. $10 billion in prevention is worth $1 trillion in cure. Okay, boldest political tactic.
Putin loses Ukraine and then goes in and seizes Crimea, and also ISIS, I hate to say it, seized Mosul right away from the Iraqi army. Astonishing success.
Eleanor.
Boldest tactic, President Obama's executive order on immigration, which will allow up to 5 million people work permits. These are 5 million people who live and work among us and have been here for some time, and the political repercussions of this are not good for Republicans.
Tom.
Hillary Clinton claiming that the reset with Russia under her watch was a success.
Mort.
Yes, I think the worst political tactics have been the way we've been relating to the Soviet Union, now Russia, okay? There are all kinds of things we should do. This guy who's running Russia, he can create havoc for the United States because he has no fear of what the United States will do.
Here's the boldest political tactic. President Obama's unilateral executive actions, such as the recent immigration amnesty and broad EPA regulations concerning carbon emissions that Professor Lawrence Tribe of Harvard University objects to as, quote, an attempt to seize lawmaking power that belongs to Congress, unquote. Mr. Obama is testing the presidency's constitutional limits, a bold experiment in seeing how far America will go in ceding power to one ruler. You got that, Pat?
Yeah, I got
Put
it.
it in a column. Okay, worst political scandal.
Worst scandal is clearly Bill Cosby. It's not political, but it's terrible and it's tragic.
Well, I hope you listened to his wife's defense of him.
I heard
Worst scandal, I've got to give that to the scandal at the VA, which cost General Eric Shinseki his job, but the new head of the VA, Bob McDonnell, I believe, yes, that's right, former CEO of Procter & Gamble, is doing a great job cleaning up that agency.
You couldn't read your notes there, Eleanor?
I looked down to read it because there's another Bob McDonnell who was the governor of Virginia, and I thought, oh my goodness, do I have it confused?
I'm
But
glad you're
evidently
doing
that's
those
his
notes yourself
name.
and you don't have
Bob
so many.
McDonald.
Yeah, okay. Tom.
Senate Democrats selling the CIA down the river because the political winds changed.
Most of those Democrats, huh? More.
The IRS harassment of a lot of political groups in this country, I think, is a scandal.
Have they ever harassed you?
Not yet.
Is it harass or harassed?
Well, it all depends how it comes out of this show.
The worst political scandal was the Veterans Administration scandal of falsifying wait lists at the VA hospitals while veterans died waiting for medical care. Okay, best idea of 2014, Pat.
Fracking. It helped to break OPEC.
Eleanor.
Body cameras for cops.
Tom.
President Obama's decision to retain combat operations in Afghanistan into 2015.
What?
Buying early on the Alibaba IPO.
Alibaba, Chinese mercantile genius.
It's an unbelievable company.
The best idea was New Jersey Governor Chris Christie's decision to impose a mandatory quarantine on travelers from West Africa who have symptoms of Ebola. Christie's mandatory quarantine was controversial and was criticized by President Obama. A Monmouth University poll shows 67% of New Jersey voters approve and 19% disapprove of Christie's quarantine. Okay, worst idea, Pat.
The war on cops, it's been developing ever since Ferguson and Staten Island.
Ella.
Worst idea, making a movie about the killing of a living head of state, which is what Sony did, inviting a hack attack that has embarrassed top executives and really exposed the company to embarrassment and ridicule and lawsuits.
Tom.
Worst idea is President Obama's decision to produce the immigration reform executive ruling because it has destroyed potential for compromise.
Mort.
The worst idea was prematurely removing our troops from Iraq and that part of the world.
Worst idea was President Obama's decision to turn over control of ICANN, Internet Committee, for assigning names and numbers to an international authority that includes Russia and China. Okay, sorry to see you go. Pat.
Sid Caesar, the funniest man of the 1950s.
Hello.
Robin Williams, the funniest man of the 2000s.
Tom.
Congressman Mike Rogers, House Intelligence Committee, honorable man.
Mort.
Mike Nichols, the funniest man of all the people mentioned.
Died.
He died.
Mike Rogers leaves office, he's not passing.
Yeah, these are all, funereal predictions, or not predictions, salutes. Sorry to see you go, General Eric Shinseki, the decorated Vietnam combat veteran who had the ill fortune to head up the Veterans Administration when this year's scandal about lengthy waiting lists at VA hospitals broke. Shinseki was an honorable man atop a bureaucracy of dissemblers and miscreants. Okay, 15 minutes of fame. Pat.
RG3, the Redskins quarterback. The city's having a hard time with that one.
Hello.
The nurse who stood up to Governor Christie and Governor Cuomo and the governor of Rhode Island and went out and rode her bike and said she wasn't showing symptoms and she wasn't going to cave to their ridiculous quarantine.
Right, Tom.
Former Secret Service Director Pearson, who was brought in to shake up the agency but had to leave when an intruder managed to get inside the White House.
Mort.
The new owner of the New Republic magazine, Chris Hughes.
He's changed the magazine.
Yes, he has.
Turned it upside down.
Yes, he has.
Is it going to work?
I would never comment negatively about anybody else's efforts in the
100
magazine
years
world.
old,
Yes, I know it. He'd like it to last at least another 2 years.
I subscribe. 15 minutes of fame. Wendy Davis, the Texas legislator, whose run for governor collapsed when it was discovered by the Dallas Morning News that her biography was wildly inflated. You got to be careful of that stuff, Pat. We told you about it. Only last year she was touted as a rising star in the Democratic Party. Okay, best spin of the year, Pat.
Hands up, don't shoot. It never happened, John, that way in the streets of Ferguson.
Helena.
Speaker Boehner on why he can't bring a vote on immigration in the House. His members come to him and say, "Ooh, it's just too hard. Don't make me do it."
His mimicry, you liked his mimicry?
Yeah, that was his mimicry. I'm probably not a good imitator of John Boehner, but I think people get the point.
His mimicry is better than the real thing.
Right.
Tom.
President Obama's narrative that the Republicans are wholly responsible for the lack of progress in bipartisan governance.
What?
I still love what this guy, John Gruber, said when he falsified his assessment of Obamacare, and I quote, "I just wanted to make myself sound smarter." I love that, and somebody who's trying to validate a major piece of legislation.
Yeah, and he complicated the legislation,
Did
so
he
that he
ever?
was only the one who could explain it.
Right, and now that they found out what he's done, it's really undermined a lot of the
How do you
political
count? How do
support.
you count for the amount of money that Gruber has made?
He made hundreds of thousands of dollars, $6 million.
$6 million.
Yeah, I don't
On the healthcare.
Well, in connected things, yeah.
connect
Oh.
to exactly right.
Oh,
No one knew what was going on. They had to ask it.
The whole thing is such a ridiculous
does
story.
this
You
roll
couldn't
back
make it
on? Does this roll back onto Obama?
No, it rolls back
He
onto
also
Obamacare.
was an architect of Romney Care. This is bipartisan.
Okay, Best spin of the year. President Obama's spin at his recent Beijing summit that China has agreed to cut its carbon emissions. The spin worked. The press gave him approving headlines. The facts are that China did not agree to cut carbon emissions at all. Xi Jinping agreed to consider cutting carbon emissions, possibly by 2030, 15 years from now, but no commitment whatsoever for the immediate future. Best spin of the year. Okay, the most overrated, Pat.
Hillary Rodham Clinton and her memoir and her performance.
Eleanor.
That was last year. Next year will be different. Russian President Vladimir Putin, who has basically destroyed the Russian economy, and he is a pariah on the world stage.
Did you find her remark to you insulting?
No, I think Putin's in trouble.
No, she said your old hat.
No,
Well, she
I
said,
said
I'm
Hillary
right in
Clinton,
2014 maybe, but not 2015.
Okay.
Pat and I,
Okay, I'm just.
Pat and I know what we're doing.
Tom.
I don't think Putin is in as much trouble as he should be because of his psychology, but I think the real issue here is Thomas Piketty, the French economist, who I think is overrated.
What?
Yeah, I was going to refer to the great leader of Russia, whom I don't think is underrated, and I don't think he's overrated. He's done an amazing job with very little other than fear to help him manage his way through a very weak Soviet economy, Russian economy.
Most overrated, the Democratic Liberal Coalition of young people, single white women, African Americans, and Hispanics. This liberal coalition, frayed at the edges in 2010, showed signs of distress in 2012 and collapsed completely in 2014. Women have defected in droves, working class whites have left the party, and young people and Hispanics are drawing away. Okay, the most underrated, Pat.
Bashar Assad of Syria. I mean, Obama said a couple of years ago he's got to go. Everybody said he's got to go. The guy is still there. Whatever you say about him, and he may be a very bad man, he is one great survivor.
Eleanor.
Most underrated is President Obama, who will be credited for bringing the economy back from the depths of a recession. And the economy is taking off. I think it's going to do very well by 2016. And that coalition that you were talking about that's fraying, it re-elected Obama in 2012, and it will be back in 2016. Off-year elections are Republican territory. The main event, the presidential election, still benefits Democrats more.
Well, I feel somewhat better after hearing you.
You're supposed to feel somewhat worse after hearing me.
Well,
okay.
A little balance.
Menza. Okay.
Qasem Soleimani, who is the leader of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps External Action Force, the Quds Force, who is essentially now the leader of Iraq because of his power with militias inside Iraq.
Very insightful. More.
Well, I believe that Mayor Bloomberg of New York was underrated, in part when you compare him to the current mayor of New York, who is doing a terrible job in my judgment. Mike Bloomberg looks absolutely underrated in terms of the way that he was reviewed, even though he was well reviewed when he was mayor.
Tell Bloomberg to run for president, will you?
Boy, I tell you, he'd be terrific. However,
He thinks he's
whatever.
too old. He's not too old. The most underrated is the positive impact of America's energy boom on the U.S. economy, manufacturing and jobs, and U.S. national security. The energy boom unleashed by hydraulic fracking is a global game changer. Energy independence means the U.S. no longer has to rely on Middle Eastern oil fields. It's the most underrated phenomenon of the year. Okay, macro prediction. Pat.
Breakup of the Eurozone.
Hello.
The two candidates who look like they're going to represent their parties are the establishment candidates, Jeb Bush and Hillary Clinton. And Jeb Bush is going to run against the base of his party, and Hillary Clinton's got to embrace the base of her party. They've each got two very different challenges.
So Jeb is running.
It sure looks that way.
Tom.
New acts of aggression on the part of President Putin.
What?
I think, as a macro prediction, I think the economy is going to grow at somewhere between 2 and 2.5% for the next several years. That's a very weak recovery.
But it's there.
It's if you want to call that a recovery, yes, it's not a decline, but it's not enough to really have an impact.
Is terrible, though.
What?
We'll take what we can get.
Yes, the job market is terrible.
But it is improving.
All right,
So
hold
there's-
on. My macro prediction is that America will regain its economic footing next year, thanks to the energy boom unleashed by record oil production and hydraulic fracking. Steady economic growth will restore American confidence and silence the doom mongers. who have spent the past 5 years predicting the inevitability of America's decline. Okay, New Year's resolution. Pat,
Take a vacation, which I didn't do this year, John, and finish my Nixon book.
where are you going to go?
We're just going to go over the Eastern Shore.
Treat the 24 Republicans considering running for the president respectfully, even though I think most of them probably belong on the clown car. It takes a lot of courage to enter the arena of politics. You got to stand up and have the courage to fail in front of a lot of people. So I'll treat them all respectfully.
Tom,
Retain my British accent so I can continue to hopefully do TV appearances, at the same time build my writing portfolio on domestic politics as well as foreign policy.
very edifying.
Thank you.
Very. Mort.
I'm going to take up long distance running again this year. My back, I think, is finally healed, and I'm going to run 3 to 5 miles every day.
Central Park.
Central Park.
My New Year's resolution is to keep the McLaughlin Group a spin-free zone where the latest party-issued talking points and line of the day are banished. In their place, you'll find honest analysis, divergent views, and independent thinking. Happy New Year. Bye-bye.
Looking for these? You drive Buzzed. It could be one very expensive ride.
First, you gotta make bail. Then pay me to get your car back.
Your insurance premiums will go through the roof.
And my legal fees just keep adding up. All told, it could end up costing you $10,000.
Buzzed, busted, and broke. Because buzz driving is drunk driving.